Welcome to Mobile Math, math lessons on the go. Today's learning goal, by the end of this lesson, I should be able to multiply positive and negative numbers together using an area model. So we're going back to the area model, and we'll do this again without the use of a calculator. So a quick reminder, multiplication is a shortcut for repetitive addition. So 3 times 4 is the same as 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3. Our big ideas from the last two videos. We had a positive times a positive is a positive. That's one we've seen for quite a while. The next one was a positive times a negative, or a negative times a positive. The result ends up being a negative. And lastly, and this was the big one, or the one that's probably going to cause the most confusion, is a negative times a negative actually equals a positive value. So we'll keep those big ideas fresh in our minds. I've got them in the top corners of some of the examples in case we forget. So let's get started. So find the product of negative 9 times negative 8. So you'll notice up here I have our big ideas in the right corner just in case we get a little bit lost. So I'm going to do the same problem twice, but I'm going to use two different area models. One might appeal to you more than the other, and that's okay. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side here, and I have a negative 5 times a negative 5. So right away I see a negative times a negative. I know that value is going to be a positive, and a 5 times a 5 is a 25. A negative 5 times a negative 3, again, I know my answer is going to be positive because I'm multiplying two negatives together. 5 times 3 is 15. When I move down to the bottom, a negative 4 times a negative 5, positive 20, and a negative 4 times a negative 3, positive 12. When I add all of that together, I start with 25, 40, 60, 72 by the time I'm all done. So let's move over to the second example here. And you'll notice I broke this up a little differently. So I expressed negative 8 as a combination of negative 10 plus 2 and the negative 9 as a negative 10 plus 1. So that gives me some more flexibility in finding friendly numbers. So a negative 10 times a negative 10 is a positive 100. A negative 10 times a positive 2. Now I have to be careful here. I'm using a different big idea. So a negative times a positive should end up being a negative. Okay, I'll move down to the bottom row. 1 times a negative 10. Again, I'm doing a positive times a negative, so I've got to be careful of my signs. And lastly, 1 times 2, both positive values. I can add or put the 2 in the last corner. If I add these together, I start with 100. I'm going down by 20 to 80, down by 10 more to 70, up by 2, and I go back to 72, and you'll see I have the same answer for both. So let's try that again. We'll do some larger numbers this time. So 98 times 18. So right away, my friendly number sense is going off. I'm seeing 100 and a 20 in this problem before I've even started it. So you'll notice in the first area model, instead of writing 98, I wrote 100 plus negative 2. And instead of 18, I wrote 20 plus negative 2. So if I do my first square here, 100 times 20, that's a positive 2,000. 20 times negative 2, so I have a positive times a negative. I end up with negative 40. Negative 2 times 100, that's a negative 200. And lastly, a negative 2 times a negative 2, that's my two negatives together, so I know that will be a positive 4. And if I have to, I'll even write a positive in front of the 2,000. So when I go to add this up, I'm going to start at 2,000. I'm going to remove or add 200 negatives, which will bring me down to 1,800, 1,760, and then add 4 more, 1,764. Now I've done that a little quicker because I'm a little bit more comfortable. If you have to write it all out, by all means, I just have limited space to write on my screen here. So let's look at the next one. This one I've done in the more traditional sense, and that I've left all the numbers positive. So 10 times 90, 900. 10 times 8, 80. 8 times 90, 720, and 8 times 8 is 64. So let's go through, and I'm going to start with 900, and then I'm going to add 700 more to get 1,600. 20 and an 80 is 1,700, and the remaining 64, 1,764. So the same answer, two different ways. our third and final example. So find the product of 66 times negative 25. So again, the 66, I'm going to break that up into a 70 plus a negative 4. The negative 25 is going to be a negative 20 and a negative 5 added together. So let's get started. Negative 20 times positive 70, so I know I'm going to have a negative answer here. Negative 20 times negative 4, so two negatives I'm multiplying together. I should have a positive 80 as the result. Negative 5 times positive 70, that's a negative times a positive, so my answer should be negative 350. And lastly, negative 5 times negative 4 is a positive 20. So if I look at just my negatives together right now, I have negative 1,750. If I look at just the positive numbers, I have to add 100. So my final answer, negative 1,650. If I move over to my second example, I've broken this down just a little differently. I used all positive numbers across the top. So I'll run through this fairly quickly. Negative 20 times positive 60. Negative 20 times positive 6. Negative 5 times positive 60. And lastly, negative 5 times positive 6. So you'll notice all of my numbers came out negative in this one. That's okay. So when we add them up, so we have negative 1,200, negative 1,500, negative 1,620, negative 1,650, and I come up with the same answer. So if you could just press pause on the video and try the following. So find the product for the following two, and then we'll come back and take them up. So please press pause now. Okay, welcome back. So let's have a quick look at solutions for these two. I'm going to do them with two area models really quickly. So negative 10 times negative 20, positive 200, negative 10 times positive 2, negative 20, 1 times negative 20, and lastly 1 times 2. So when I add those all up, I have 200, 180, 160, 162. Let's move to the second one. 10 times 20 again is 200. 10 times 3 is 30. Negative 3 times 20, so I have to be careful. That's a negative 60. And negative 3 times positive 3, negative 9. So I'm going to count these again. So 200. I'm going to add 60 negatives, so that gets me down to 140. Add back 30 positives. That gets me to 170. Add 9 negatives, and 200, 230, 170, 161 should be my final answer. Thank you for watching. Please watch again and pause where you may have had difficulties, and good luck in your future math problems.